All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Today is December the 10th. This is the December meeting for the Budget Committee for the City of Jackson. Go ahead and call this meeting to order. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes. Sandy has sent those out previously, earlier in last month. And if there's no changes or amendments to that, we'll just approve those as presented. Have any changes or amendments to those? If not, then we'll take those as approved. We'll move on to business. Item 3A, update. Every month we've been tracking our revenue projections, specifically our sales tax and hotel motel tax. Mr. Arnold, could you, I'll pull up on screen your spreadsheet, and could you speak a little bit to where we are at present?
Yes, thank you. Good morning to everyone. So just a quick update on sales tax, local sales tax, state sales tax, and hotel tax. I'll kind of look at it from two different perspectives. We published our October financial statements. We are working to publish our November statements, but they're not quite available yet. So if you look at the month of October for local sales tax in total, year to date compared to our annual budget, our numbers, local sales tax 7.287 million. That is 42% of our annual budget. Recognizing there are other seasonal implications, but just a straight annualization of the budget, we had expected or hoped to be at 33% of that total, so we're at 42%, so we're exceeding our budget. On local sales tax, similar situation on state sales tax, not up quite as much as the local sales tax. We're at 37% of our annual budget versus a target of 33%. And then hotel tax, we're actually at 60% of our annual budget versus the target at this point of 33%. If you look ahead to November, we have received November's sales tax payment, obviously, and I've updated the numbers for November. So this would just be straight cash receipts in terms of sales tax compared to the prior year. Not to get us sidetracked, but this would just be straight cash receipts and would not recognize like the financial statement, which has accruals from last year and that type of thing in it. But if you just look at straight receipts for sales tax, local sales tax through November, 1,807,000 compared to 1,614,000 last year. So that's about a 12% increase for the month of November. If you look year to date through November, we're at 9,095,000 for this year compared to 8,555,000 last year. So a 6% increase kind of year to date, year over year.
That's good news. I think welcome news in what we've been dealing with. But Lori, while we have you on here, would you mind just kind of giving us a snapshot of where we are on hotel motel tax?
Absolutely. We have, as you remember, in August and September, we were pretty flat to what we were last year, and we were very pleased. We attribute a great portion of that to the activity out the West Tennessee Healthcare Sportsplex. Unfortunately, in October, although we had a strong showing from the Sportsplex, with their tournaments, the dropping of the Lane College Homecoming, which is a major event, it did impact our bottom line. We were down about 9.3%. We look for our numbers hopefully to hold steady through the end of the year and into the first of the year. All of this, of course, is contingent upon COVID.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions about revenue projections?
Yeah, Paul, I just had a quick question. Given specifically to hotel motel tax, given the seasonality of hospitality, I mean, this I'm a little surprised by this number in a good way for November. What can we expect? Obviously, it's subjective given the pandemic, but for the next 3 months that are typically the slower periods in the hospitality industry.
Lori, do you want to speak to that?
Certainly. Our hope is that if we can maintain where we were last year, and last year was such a record-setting year, we would be very pleased with that. I think, unfortunately, with the COVID and the increase of cases that we're seeing, and the lack of a statewide mandate, I don't know that we're going to see that number maintain flat. I would imagine it would drop as the cases continue to rise. So even if we projected to be down considerably more. So if we can at least remain flat, I think that's a good marker for us. We go down in November to about 172,000, and then December, January, and February, those reach into the $130,000 marks. If we can get somewhere around that, I think it would be good news for our community.
Yeah, and Andrew, if you recall, that we've significantly projected conservative numbers on the hotel motel tax. There was a couple of months where we were figuring that we were going to be as low as 90% of the year before, and so it's been good that we've turned out. The lowest month we've had was about 60% below year to date. So if we can continue to be in the 10% down or flat, I think it'll be beneficial for us.
Right. So we won't necessarily be in great shape, but we could potentially be in much better shape than what we expected when we were budgeting several months ago.
Yeah,
Yes.
and the way that I've kind of viewed this is that every dollar that we exceed our conservative budget projections for hotel motel tax and sales tax is just closing that deficit gap that we budgeted in the beginning. And so we're, every month we close that gap a little further, and it'll be as we get into the next year, and if the economy continues the way it is, it'll be interesting to see where we end up. But those are some of the discussions we'll have here in January, February. Once we have about 6 months of data to go off of, we can project forward and see where we'll hopefully end up. Any other questions regarding that? All right, our next item of business is an updated debt schedule. With the addition of Madison and the fire department lease, I asked Bobby to update that debt schedule for us. Let me pull that up here. Here we go. Bobby, could you speak to kind of where we are at present?
Sure, be happy to. So Paul did ask for an update on the debt service for next year, recognizing the recently approved fire department lease and the fact that we anticipate Madison High School coming online in next fiscal year. So I decided to go ahead and prepare this spreadsheet, which sort of summarizes all of our debt. I thought that might be helpful to everyone. I hope you find the format friendly to you and in reading it and understanding it. So with the refunding back in 2019, we consolidated a bunch of our bonded debt. So now we have only, depending on how you want to look at it, 1 or 2 bond issues outstanding, depending on how you view the 2019 issue as a 1 issue or 2 issues. We had a big refunding, and then we also had a $6 million new issue. So that's laid out in the first couple of columns. We have 3 capital outlay notes from the past. Those notes are reflected in, I guess that'd be the next 3 columns. And then we do have 2 leases, both the Madison lease and the Jackson Fire Department lease. They're considered capital leases. And so the last columns on the right kind of sum up by year, our principal, our interest, and our lease payments that would kind of be funneled and funded through our debt service fund, if you will. And I guess the point that Paul would like for us to note is if you'll look at from 2021, and these are fiscal years, to FY22, our debt service does increase. I think it's about $805,000 next year. The footnotes on this schedule are particularly important, so I encourage you to look at those. And a couple of those footnotes are related to both the lease that we will be entering into for Madison High School and then the fire department lease, and a couple of key points related to that, particularly on the fire department. While I have included that in this debt service schedule, the plan is that the fire department will be making some reductions in their operating budget and their repair and maintenance costs, and they have plans to reduce their staffing and benefit costs. That the plan would be to use those operating dollars and shift those over to debt service dollars. And that's reflected in the footnote. And then you may recall, it's been some time, I know, since we've talked about the Madison High School project, but you will probably recall that that final approved plan reflected an annual payment from West Tennessee Healthcare and one from the University of Memphis. The University of Memphis commitment was for 4 years. So the payment that you see in the lease column for the Madison project is net of or recognizes those payments that the city will receive to help fund that cost from West Tennessee Healthcare and from the University of Memphis. And then finally, in terms of the city's overall debt, I think some of you may be aware, we have a loan from HUD that was initiated several years ago to kind of help jumpstart both CRA districts. And the debt service on that debt each year is actually refunded through HUD back to us, so that's kind of a wash. And that debt is recognized in the CRA fund. It's not in our regular debt service fund. And then finally, the city still has, I think, about 4 more years on a loan associated with West Tennessee Healthcare, where a few years the hospital matched some money from the city such that the CRA could acquire some property over in the Midtown area close to Lambeth. That debt back to the hospital has been serviced each year in the past by the CRA, and that's the plan moving forward. And that too is reflected in the CRA fund and not the debt service fund.
Okay.
So that's kind of a summary, but I would encourage you when you're reviewing this schedule later to kind of revisit the notes at the bottom. For instance, all of the capital outlay notes are variable rate debt. So the requirements that you see here are sort of estimated at this point. It'll be, historically, we've done a pretty good job of being conservative on our estimates on that variable rate debt, but we'll see how they play out.
So Bobby, as we move through on into fiscal year 2024 and proceed down this path of increasing debt requirements, that those effectively the rate at which we attribute towards the sinking fund would increase out of our property taxes. Is that correct? The percentage.
Yeah, that's correct. So the budget year that we're in right now, the FY, I guess the 21 budget, you may recall that was a change in that we shifted some property tax dollars that previously, in the previous year anyway, had been allocated to the capital outlay fund. We shifted those over to the debt service fund to help service the debt increases that we're seeing this year. And you're correct, Paul, and that if, as we discussed in the budget process this year, if we can make it through the 2024 fiscal year, as you can see from the schedule, our debt service requirements drop off by about $6 million in FY25. So,
Okay. Thank you, Bobby.
you're welcome.
Any questions for Bobby? We'll move on to item C, CARES Act funding and expenses. You found I sent out a report that was put together by the mayor's office regarding CARES Act funding. Let me pull that up. And if I can. There we go. Alex or Lauren, were you guys going to speak to this? Kind of give us an update on where we are?
Yeah, I can talk through it. So first part of the report just talks about the allotment that we are anticipating to receive from the state. It's based on population. We did submit over that amount in qualifying reimbursements per the advice of our consultants. So there is a chance that we could receive more depending on how generous the state wants to be. To date, we've only received a little bit over 400,000 of that, but we're expecting the rest anytime. Don't really have a clear day on when that will be in, but once the rest is received, Bobby will be presenting that as a budget amendment. Paul, if you want to scroll down. So as the mayor's office and internal innovation committee have reviewed needs, certainly, and other things throughout this time during COVID, we kind of identified these areas as the best ways to spend these reimbursements. And also, just for some more background, we submitted payroll reimbursements for first responders that have already been paid, and therefore, according to our consultants, we can then utilize that reimbursement however is needed in the city as it meets the outcomes related to increasing efficiency, reducing contact between people, et cetera, for the city. So Mayor recently announced the employee bonuses, which is a big chunk of these funds that will be going to first responders getting $1,000 and other employees up to $500 based on payroll. And that number that you see there is going up a little bit due to our FICA TCRS match. I believe we're looking at around 665,000, a little bit more. So we'll update that. And then the next category is non-FEMA eligible expenses. So some things that we've paid for out of this fiscal year that aren't going to be able to be reimbursed by FEMA. FEMA will reimburse us on some supplies, but this is kind of things like GoToMeeting that we're using right now, TeamViewer, resources that weren't FEMA eligible. That number's going to go down probably around $5,000 to $6,000. Stacy Sohn, our risk management director, is working on that and can have a more detailed version to present. The next two is software purchases that we've already contracted with based on the state contract and interlocal agreement. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Dropbox, but that's just going to really help us with file sharing, and especially for working with the public on filling out job applications, things like that. That cost would go down. We wouldn't need as many subscriptions once we do invest in a new ERP system, the core financial system, which was another discussion. And then the OpenGov permitting, we've already moved forward on that, starting implementation that will allow contractors to be able to apply for, receive permits fully online, get status checks at any point during the permitting process, have photos submitted from the inspector to the online portal. It's really great software, and the good thing about it is it works with other software, so no matter what core financial system we use, we'll be able to utilize that. And then the last thing that we have proposed is a new CAD system for the fire department so that they're on the same CAD system as dispatch and police, which will just really help with public safety being coordinated better. So again, that total, this is more important looking at like the items and the costs right now is still being adjusted and all of that. But right now we have that $1,003,545 allotment from the state. We could be receiving more, and anything that's left over after those first few purchases, we would put toward a new core financial system, which is definitely a long range purchase that would be part of our budget. So of course, when you have a conversation about investing in software with something like this, with reimbursement funds, you also have to think through the long term. How does this roll into our regular operating capital budget with subscription fees and things like that? So I think that's pretty much the overview, but Alex or Paul, feel free to supplement that.
Yeah, so just to kind of round that out. So initially we were granted $1,003,000 in funds. The city submitted $1.8 million in funds because I guess it was our understanding that there were certain communities that weren't submitting anything for reimbursement. So there's the potential for us, when it all shakes out, if there's additional funds left out of the CARES Act, that those could be redistributed based on needs that are already presented. So, you know, there's a potential for about another $800,000 if there are some leftover funds. As we kind of go through this, one of the things, and I'm going to go ahead and add these two agenda items together, item D, the Innovation Committee. So the mayor's put together an Innovation Committee to go through and look at our software systems. Lauren, Bobby, and myself sit on that, and we've been working, really looking at how all of our systems work together. And some of you may know that we're working on a pretty antiquated system right now. I think it's DOS based, so you have to go in and, you know, type in every field and no mouse or anything. So moving us in that direction is going to be very beneficial, not only for the staff, but also for us to be able to generate stuff. I had invited the committee to sit on both a demo with Tyler Munis and OpenGov, who have kind of been our final two to look at because of their ability to integrate with some of our other existing systems. And I think we feel comfortable that either one of those could meet our needs, but they're still looking through, you know, which of those may be best for us to pursue. And so, as Lauren stated, out of that $1 million that we feel confident in getting, about 900, anywhere from 820,000 to 924,000 has been initially allocated towards these, with the exception of Tyler Munis. Where this shakes out, the balance can go towards our fund balance or could go towards implementation of this core financial system. So I misspoke on any of that, Bobby or Lauren, correct me, but I think that's where we're at present.
Yep, no, you're spot on. I also have Brian Taylor joining on this call today in case there's any specific questions on the software side of things. He's been working with Tyler Munis most directly.
Any questions on that, Andrew?
Just one quick question. Once reimbursements are ceased, do we know from an ongoing, you know, subscription cost, what kind of ongoing cost long term can be associated with these investments?
I can speak to the core financial, but Brian may be able to speak to OpenGov and the Central Square a little bit better. I know the Dropbox, I think that's an annual subscription. That's it right there. But our hope is that when we implement this Tyler Munis or OpenGov, that a lot of the functionality that we're getting out of Dropbox and Hello Sign would roll up under this, and we could pull that off of the needs list. Brian, am I right on that?
Yes. That's absolutely our plan, is to be able to pull back on the Dropbox and Hello Sign as a stopgap measure to assist us in, you know, making sure that we can work with the citizens and get things done without having as much face-to-face contact and streamline that. A lot of that functionality would be included in a employee and citizen portal, which would be a part of that core financial system. So we are on a year-to-year with Dropbox and HelloSign.
Okay. And then the Open Gov, is this an annual, or is this this includes some setup costs as well?
That includes setup. So annual is, I think, either right at or just under 50,000.
Okay.
But we can provide all of those in detail, and those will certainly be part of the department's budgeting processes.
Okay. Any other questions on that? If not, we'll jump on to item E, FY22 budget calendar discussion. The mayor, Bobby, and Alex and myself have been discussing setting up a council planning session. Believe that we're shooting for sometime in January, trying to find a facilitator on that at present to help work through some planning and goal setting at a very high level for the council and the mayor's office to just bring everybody into alignment. So that's as part of that. We'll start the budgeting season here in January, and start with initial discussions amongst the council and the mayor's office, move on in translating some of those discussions through the departments that are identified. Bobby, anything to add to kind of our budget calendar moving January, February, March?
No, I think you summed it up well. So.
Okay. Just giving you guys an update on where we are. Hopefully we can get that scheduled for sometime in mid-January. Moving on to item F, our outside audit for the FY20 year. Bobby, can you give an update on where we're at present on that?
Yes. So as you can imagine, COVID has impacted or disrupted, our lives, and it seems like in every respect. And certainly the audit is no different. Our audit firm, ATA, they've had challenges with COVID. We have as well. Many of their other clients have as well. So it's been a challenge. The good news is we're almost to the finish line. The auditors were on site a couple of days earlier this week. We expect to have a draft of the statement of the audit available to us hopefully tomorrow. The audit is in the process now of their quality assurance review process. The audit's gone well. The feedback I received from our audit firm has been positive in terms of some of the accomplishments that we worked hard to make in this past fiscal year, addressing some issues from the past. And I've not been made aware of any material concerns or issues with the audit. With that said, we're waiting on the final report or a draft of that report, like I said, possibly as early as tomorrow. I guess for this group, Paul, and one point that might need to clarify is what would be the wishes of this committee and mayor, the council, in terms of the report out and the issue of the audit. So I believe the last week of this month, the last week of December, we will actually have physical copies of the audit. So since we've moved the meeting date of this committee up in the month, our December meeting is taking place now. So we won't receive the copies until later in the month. And of course, I believe January 5th is the next, the January council meeting, I think is scheduled for January 5th. So in terms, Paul and the mayor, how we process the report out from the audit firm is something that we need to consider.
Yeah, that's a good point, Bobby. And, it's the, per the state's recommendation for the establishment of this audit committee, that we review those and send on recommendations to the council. So what I think would be the most applicable, we're right here in the holiday season too, but if you could get a draft report to us, and we can disseminate that amongst the budget committee to review and generate any questions. And it may be that we need to reconvene here in a week or so to review that and present any recommendations, if need be, to the council before the January meeting.
Okay, I can do that, and hopefully we'll have that available tomorrow or maybe over the weekend or the first of next week. And ATA is committed to accommodate, our needs in terms of their presentation to the audit committee and the council. So.
And Bobby, maybe you can, if I'm moving, if we're moving too quick, let me know. But if it's the intent is to accept it or consider acceptance of it at the council level in January, is that a necessity, or is that kind of traditionally how we've gone about it?
I don't know that that's a requirement or a necessity. I think that's more historically when the report has been made. So.
Okay. Mayor, do you have any input on that?
Yeah, I think if we can get the draft copy and the audit committee can look at that sooner rather than later, and we can get the we can get that in hand. I mean, that kind of goes in line. We have to prepare the RFP for next year's audit contract, and so we don't want to push this audit back too far to where we don't want to confuse the two, mix the two. We want to make sure we have some clearer time, whether that be a week or a month in between the two. And so, I mean, this is new for us from an audit committee, accepting it, looking at it, recommendations. In the past, historically, it's just been presented to the council. The council votes to accept or not accept it, and then that's it. So, I think it all depends around the audit itself. If there's no material findings, there's no issues, then there's not much to recommend to correct. And then we know that our internal auditor will be starting Monday. And so we'll have a lot more tools in the toolbox to move forward in the start of the year.
Well, so Bobby, when you get that draft, if you can send that to me and the committee, and we'll review and just see if there's anything material that we need to address, and we'll just proceed from there.
Okay, happy to.
And so what the mayor brought up too is item G on our agenda of the RFP for these services moving forward. Bobby's been working on kind of collecting some boilerplate examples from other communities on submitting this RFP. But we wanted to go ahead and clear through this audit year before doing that. And so as we kind of proceed through that, Bobby, in future months or in a future month, I may get you to present, if there's any substantive changes from what we're currently receiving to what we're seeking in the request.
Okay, that'll be fine.
Okay. Any questions on our current year audit or future audits? Okay. That brings us to item H, the balancing act, what we've called the citizen legible budget. Just to give you an update, I appreciate the mayor. He's been pushing it in his weekly Facebook videos, and I've seen a significant amount of interaction with it. I think we've had about 450 to 500 people have logged on and messed with it, and we've had about 178 people get their tax receipts. So I would encourage you, if you haven't yet, everybody that's on this call, to get in and submit how you feel the budget should be impacted, and see where your taxes are going at present, and then just share that as you can. The more information that we gather on these analytics, the better it can inform us as we move into the budgeting season. Couple of things that got brought up. Alex, can you give a quick update on some of these hires that we've got coming on?
Yes, as the mayor mentioned, Ms. McKinney, the internal auditor, she starts Monday the 14th. Offer's been accepted by Mr. Tom Wolf to be city engineer. He begins January 4th. And we have a new hire that will begin January the 18th. His name is Justin Searcy. He'll be working with us doing strategic grant writing. He comes from a strong grant writing background.
So specifically, the first two there, just to kind of give you an idea of thoughts on how they may integrate with this committee. The internal auditor, obviously, as she gets onboarded, there's a significant amount of a learning curve as she kind of comes into the city. But I'd like to have her at the January meeting, and as she kind of gets familiar over this next quarter, in January, I'd like her to start working on an audit plan for next year. And if there's the ability, if she sees something initially that she thinks that needs some investigation, then she could go ahead and begin that in this year. But we'll be working with her to kind of develop that out and talk through some of the needs that we have here.
Yes, sir, that's the plan. I'm sorry.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Alex. The city engineer, there's been a lot of discussion. I think we're all aware that our infrastructure, specifically stormwater, is a great need here in the city. And so some of the conversations that we've been having are developing out a plan to, one, assess the stormwater and develop a plan to address the stormwater. So that those will, as we kind of go through that and start putting dollars to this, that'll come back before this committee for recommendations.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions on those? We're looking into January. If we can close out the December books before we meet in January, we could have potentially that second quarter review, Bobby. And what I'd like to do moving forward is, when we have these quarterly reviews, if we could also present those to the council on a quarterly basis moving forward, just where we're at, that snapshot. And as we move forward, I know they'll become more substantive, especially as we get into this halfway point in the third quarter. The first quarter was, there's a lot to kind of unravel there, but I'd like that to be presented to the council if possible. Any other questions today? If not, our next standing meeting would be January the 14th. As we talked about last time, we're going to move that to the second Thursday of the month at 11, just so everybody's got some regularity with it. But pending review of this year's audit, we may get back together here in the month of December. Any other questions? If not, we'll adjourn. And I appreciate everybody's time today, and have a happy holidays. Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks everybody for your time.
Appreciate it, Andrew. Thank you. Thank you, Bobby.
Yes, sir.